Right, you need to be able to kind of tell me how these sand dunes form. Now, you should be able to tell that actually these are just kind of like hills of sand, lumps of sand. There's some grass on it. Now, again, you just need to be able to mention some factors that, oh yeah, this thing, there needs to be this, and that's why these things form. So let's have a look into that. Okay. An actual sand dune will eventually form because usually there's obstacles like a little piece of wood or some kind of rock. And then what happens is sand begins to kind of mold around it. So you need to mention that sand dunes form usually is because, sand drifts inland and gets trapped around obstacles. So make sure you mention something about an obstacle, e.g., like a plank of wood or something. So I'll go into now the steps. You also mention, I'm going to go into a bit more detail now about this grass that's formed on top of these dunes. They're the ones that actually hold it together. Remember, this is called marram grass. So make sure you mention that. You could still get a mark or two, even if you don't know how to answer this question, by mentioning certain things like marram grass, and you might get one mark or two. So don't leave them blank. So again, look at this diagram. It just shows you how it all starts off with like a little small dune. That dune will grow bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, it all starts off with an embryo dune. You don't have to mention all these dunes, just like the embryo one, and eventually it will get bigger. So I'm going to go into the different steps now. So if this was to come up in my exam, how would I answer it? I'd first of all mention that actually these dunes need to form on sandy beaches. It can't be on a shingle beach. Now, how do you get sandy beaches? You should know that actually these beaches form mainly because there is a lot of swash, and that takes place through constructive waves. So make sure you mention that. Step 2. You'd mention that these embryo dunes first form. If you can give this keyword, you can. If you don't, it's not that bad. I'll say dunes eventually form because lots of wind will blow onto this sandy beach, and eventually that wind will kind of find its way near like an obstacle, and it gets trapped around this obstacle. Now you think about it. Here's my Red Bull can. You can't really see it, but if it was just there and lots of wind was to blow around this obstacle, the sand will get trapped all around this kind of dune. So, or this obstacle. So you need to mention that actually the dunes will grow because usually it starts off with a little piece of wood and it molds around it. Step 3, I'd mention that these dunes over time will become stabilized as more deposition takes place and more sand is blown towards the actual kind of like embryo dune. The marram grass will eventually form. The marram grass will have long roots and it will hold the dune together. And as more continuous sand is blown by the wind, the dunes eventually get bigger. The dunes can increase in size. You can mention another example of a dune. Yellow dunes will form, and that rotting vegetation, so like nutrient cycling, eventually those grass will kind of like decompose, and that allows the dunes to get bigger and bigger and grasses to go even bigger. And that's about it really, guys. Okay, so again, this diagram really shows you obstacles such as driftwood get dropped on the beach. The wind blows the sand up the beach, gets trapped around the obstacle. These plants, which are colonizing plants, which means like they control the whole dune, like marram grass, stabilize it, creates a baby dune called an embryo dune. The plants die, adds organic matter, meaning it decomposes and adds nutrients for other plants to grow. And that's how these dunes grow bigger, because the plants hold them together.